for disappearance, we also know there are people out there with information who can help us get answers.
We do another trial and another one. I mean, when's it going to stop?
People out there are only getting one side of the story.
He has the financial means to hire law firms to find some technicality. If it was anybody else, we wouldn't be going through this again.
I'm being put in a position that no one should be put in, and that is I'm having to try to solve this case to save myself so I can be with my children.
Did you have anything to do with the disappearance of your wife?
Absolutely not.
Did you kill
Not
her?
even close.
Welcome back to True Crime Brewery. I'm Jill.
Hello, I'm Dick.
And today we're doing a case called Missing Mom. Just before we get started, I did want to apologize. We had some audio problems last week. We got some new equipment, and things should be better this week, but thank you for sticking with us. It's always a work in progress.
It always is. And listening to last week's, we sounded pretty rough.
Yeah, but the things we said hopefully were worth putting up with it.
Of course.
Okay. So, what we're talking about today has been in the news a lot lately. It's about Cal Harris. Cal Harris has been tried 4 times for the same crime, and that's the murder of his wife, and she was the mother of his 4 children, Michele Harris. Michele Harris's body has never been found, however, and we're wondering, where has she been for the past 15 years? Did her husband take her life? This case has all the ingredients of a brewery-worthy mystery. A beautiful young woman, a millionaire husband, a troubled marriage, and 4 innocent children who are missing their mom. Now, before we get to our beer review, I do have a couple of 5-star reviews I'm going to read that we received on iTunes. And the first one is from Podcat, Podkatt. And Podcat says, I really enjoyed this podcast. Dick does a great job with the beer reviews.
Thank you.
I listen to tons of true crime podcasts, and this one has a kind of down-home feel that's enjoyable. It is just a husband and wife. I don't know how they figured out we were married.
That's an assumption.
I think we might have mentioned the wedding with one of the beers once.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Allagash.
Allagash Curio.
Yeah.
I said we had it at our wedding.
Yep.
So
they're right.
Good listening.
So they're correct. We are a husband and wife. And it says, it is just a husband and wife discussing these cases. They don't claim to be experts or anything else. There's a sweet interaction between the two of them. I don't know why people are so offended that there might be another podcast with crime and beer. There is also one with wine and crime, so I guess that is off limits too. In a world of podcasts, there is something available for everyone's taste. This is a nice change of pace from some of the more serious podcasts. So I'd say thank you, Podcat. You're definitely echoing some of my thoughts.
Mine too. I think we can do the similar podcast to other beer and crime sites without infringing on their copyright.
No, I think that we are very different than the ones I've been made aware of. And then we also have another 5-star review. It's by QD416. This says, I love the podcast, ! It helps make my workday go by fast. The crime stories are amazing. Some of them I had never heard about. Great job. Keep the stories coming. So thank you, QD416 and Podcat. And I'd like to say to both of you, welcome to the brewery.
Welcome.
So let's go ahead and see what you've brought for beer before we get started on our discussion.
Well, this crime took place in upstate New York. So I chose a beer from kind of that area, Cooperstown, where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. But there's a famous brewery called Brewery Amagang. They brew Belgian beers, or Belgian-style beers, and they're quite good. So this is one of their newer editions. It's called Game of Thrones, The 7 Kingdoms. They've done a series of Game of Thrones beers. So this is, I think, the 4th one in that series. This particular beer is a Belgian IPA, which sounds like kind of an oxymoron. but it's beer usually made with Belgian yeast and American hops. They tend to be drier and cleaner than American IPAs. Most Belgians don't like American IPAs because they're too hoppy. So this kind of tones down the hops and lets the Belgian yeast come through a little bit more. And I think it's more palatable to the Belgians or the European drinkers. It's certainly good for us United States drinkers. So anyway, Game of Thrones, Seven Kingdoms, poured a light orange color with a large white head and abundant lace. Very pretty beer. There's a spicy yeast aroma as well as some citrus. The taste is lemon and some orange and a bit of clove, and it finishes very crisp and dry. A nice beer.
So now, is there any real connection to Game of Thrones, or is that just a clever name for it to get attention?
I think it's the latter. It's not any relationship to Game of Thrones, because I haven't seen any brewery Amagon beers being poured on the TV show.
No, but they do have more than one Game of Thrones beer, right? It's a series? Is that what you said?
Right.
Okay. Because I know there's one called, is it called Mother of Dragons or Dragon Beer or
something? And there's one called the Iron Throne or something like that.
Okay.
So there's more than one.
Okay.
This is just the latest iteration. Probably there'll be more.
I would think so. All right. Sounds great. Thank you. So let's take our stools, let's take our Game of Thrones bottle and our glasses, and let's slide on down there to the quiet end of the bar and have a little discussion about missing mom.
Missing mom and drinking beer. A good thing to do.
Well, when I miss my mom, I drink beer. It works.
It works well.
So on September 12th of 2001, the day after the 9/11 terror attacks in New York City and at the Pentagon, in a small town of Owego in upstate New York, Cal Harris was awake early for work. Now he owned several large car dealerships in town, and when he woke 3 of his 4 children for school, he realized that his wife, Michele, hadn't returned home from her waitressing job the night before. Now he wasn't too alarmed because they'd been living separate lives, although they were in the same home. They were planning a divorce, which Michele had applied for about 8 months prior to that. When Michele was reported missing and Cal was interviewed, he said that she sometimes went out with friends after work, but staying out all night was unusual for her. So while most of the country was dealing with the tragedy of 9/11 terrorist attacks, Michele's family had a personal tragedy of their own to deal with. Now, Michele had an appointment with her attorney that day, her divorce attorney, but she didn't show up. And her attorney, being aware of threats that her husband had made against her, notified the police that Michele was missing.
Allegedly made against her.
Yes. Well, they were aware of what Michele had told them.
Okay.
Now, Michelle's minivan was found about a half-mile from the house, and that was along a driveway because they had a 250-acre-plus estate. Now, Cal was not alarmed by this either. He said that he figured she just met someone to go out drinking the night before and parked the van where it was and left in the other person's car who she'd met.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Now, there's no blood in the van and no damage to the vehicle. The keys were left in the ignition, and nothing suspicious was found in the home either. And that day, Cal allowed the police to search the home, and the search for Michele on the Harris' property was very extensive, including search dogs, scuba divers, because there was a lake on the property as well as acres of thick woods. And eventually that day, the police brought in helicopters and underwater cameras, but they still found no trace of Michele.
No trace whatsoever.
No. So they went back and the police traced Michelle's activities from the night before. Now, she worked at a local restaurant, and co-workers said she left when her shift was over about 9 p.m. on September 11th. But she hadn't left the restaurant alone. She'd been walking out with one of the cooks, and his name was Michael Hakes. So she walked out of work with him, and then when police interviewed Michael Hakes on the 12th, he said that he said goodbye to Michele that night in the parking lot, and he hadn't seen her since. Now, the surveillance cameras weren't working properly outside of the restaurant, and they couldn't confirm the story one way or the other.
So what did he say he did? I mean, he said good night to her and left. Did he go home, or where did he go?
Yeah, he had an alibi. He said he went straight to his girlfriend's house and spent the night with her. He said he arrived at her house around 9:45 p.m., and his girlfriend did confirm this.
Okay, so that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, but the only thing is the restaurant was only a 15-minute drive to his girlfriend's house, so that did leave 30 minutes unaccounted for between him leaving work and arriving at his girlfriend's house.
Be that as it may, it would be difficult to murder somebody, dispose of the body, park the car at the entrance to her house, and get to his girlfriend's house all in half an hour.
That's a good point. The only thing that really alarmed them was there was a background check of Michael Hakes, and it did show a prior conviction for rape and for attempted murder in Arizona.
Bingo.
He'd actually served 10 years in an Arizona prison, and he'd only been out for about a year. Now, Hakes' employers at the restaurant didn't know that he was a registered sex offender, so Michele probably didn't know that either.
Probably not.
No.
And the alibi that the girlfriend provided is pretty airtight. And I know it's just her saying he spent the night with her.
Right.
But they couldn't get her to shake out of that story.
No, but they weren't just going to accept that as law. They still were going to investigate him.
Okay. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
A rapist who's been convicted and also of attempted murder.
Yeah, rape and attempted murder of the same woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. But investigators did believe right away that Michael probably had done something to Michele, because that was enough for them to really shed some suspicion on him as he'd left the restaurant with her.
Right.
But when they were analyzing Michelle's van, they did find fingerprints from two different people on the driver's side of the door, and neither of them matched Michael Hakes. So that put him in the clear, at least temporarily, when that was found.
I'm going to assume he did a lie detector test at some point.
I don't know. I do know that police investigators examined Michelle's cell phone records, and they learned that a man named Brian Early had called Michele on the night she disappeared. They said that he called her on her cell phone, and he'd left a message actually asking her to stop by his place after work.
Okay.
Now, Michele and Brian actually had been dating for about a year, and he'd moved from Philadelphia to upstate New York to be closer to Michele. In his interviews, he said he was in love with her and wanted to marry her.
That's very sweet.
It is sweet. It's a little interesting. Now, Michele was 35, Brian was 23. But she was a pretty hot-looking MILF. She didn't look her age, really. And he seemed like he was really crazy about her. He'd been spending a lot of time with her, and they'd been making some long-term plans, although Michelle's friends said she wasn't anxious to get right back into a marriage after what she'd gone through with Cal.
One can imagine.
Yeah. So when Brian was questioned by the police, he did admit to seeing Michele the night before her disappearance. He said that she left his apartment around 11 p.m. that night. He'd walked her to her car, kissed her goodnight, and then she drove off. And he says that's the last time he saw her was around 11 p.m. on the 11th.
So his story is that he left her a text message or a voice message, said, let's get together after work. She left work, drove over to his place, spent an hour or two with him, and then went home.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, Brian Early is the last person known to have seen Michele alive, and the fingerprints on Michelle's car door are identified as Brian's. But this was consistent with his story, that he leaned in through the driver's side window to kiss Michele goodnight. And he insisted that this happened in his apartment building parking lot when she left that night.
Sure, I can buy that.
So, as far as we know, Brian's the last person, he's the last person admitting to seeing Michele that night. But police also feel that they need to investigate if Michelle's soon-to-be ex-husband, Cal Harris, did something to her, because there was obviously some tension going on in the marriage.
So they were, as you said, they were divorcing.
Right.
Some of it probably is a factor in it is probably that they had 4 kids in 5 years. That's a lot of young'uns running around.
That's a lot of kids they had. In the first 6 years, I think they had 4 children under the age 6.
Right.
Yeah.
And Cal himself blamed that the constant child care was a factor in the breakup of their marriage. Although they had a nanny, so it wasn't just that Cal and Michele were taking care of the babies themselves.
No, they had help.
They had plenty of help. He's a wealthy guy.
Mm-hmm.
So there's tension there. There's apparently some extramarital affairs. Cal had an affair that we were told about. Michele had several affairs, according to Cal.
I think she did, but I think that what most of her friends and family are saying is that after his initial affair, it started going downhill, and it was towards the last year of their marriage where she was sexually active with several men.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do.
Okay.
Not with men, but,
okay.
You know, if we're getting divorced and things are heading down the tubes, you live it up.
Yeah. She's a young, attractive woman.
So they're divorcing. Her attorney, Michele's attorney, said that she had obtained an order of protection from Cal while they continued to live together. That kind of was a unique arrangement to me, that they were going to share this big old house.
Right, right.
But the protection order prohibited any mental or physical abuse of Michele. So I don't know if that means that he was inflicting mental or physical abuse on her.
Certainly implies it, doesn't it?
Or that she's just covering things and doesn't want to be at risk.
Yeah, well, she did have guns removed from the household shortly before then because she said she was afraid of Cal. And she had them sent to her brother's house for storage.
Yeah. And then she got a job at that dive bar.
Yeah, was it Lucky's? Is that what it was
Lucky's.
called? Lucky's. No, Lefty's. Lefty's is what it was called.
Oh, let's go back. Lefties.
So I guess she had the job because, well, to get out and meet people for one thing, but Cal would not pay for childcare while she went out to work or out with her friends. So she did have to pay that out of her own money.
Pay the nanny.
Yeah, but not all of the nanny's hours, just the nanny's hours when she was out in the evening at her job or with friends. The nanny was paid full-time during the day by Cal, and that wasn't a problem for him.
Right. He was paying the mortgage. He was paying the household bills and other expenses. So most of the nanny.
Right.
Apparently she was getting $400 a week spending money.
Okay.
Which, I mean, if she's paying the nanny while she's out working and drinking and stuff, that might not last too long.
Well, I'm thinking that maybe this job was more to just get out of the house because it doesn't seem like it was financially beneficial for her to go to that job.
I'm sure it wasn't.
No.
But anyway, she ran up a lot of money in credit card debt.
Oh, really?
She owed $16,000 on her credit card or cards.
Okay.
And she owed at least $1,000 to the babysitter or the nanny.
Okay. Now that had something to do with her planned trip to New York before 9/11 happened?
Well, she was planning on going to New York after 9/11. I mean, the plans were probably made before 9/11 happened, but she's planning on being in New York the 13th and 14th of September.
Okay. To visit friends?
She told her husband, or her soon-to-be former husband, she was going to meet a former classmate and have some fun in New York City. She told her other friends, however, that she was going to New York to pawn some of her jewelry, including her Rolex watch, her 2-carat diamond engagement ring, because of financial problems.
Okay.
Now, you had mentioned earlier that she turned down, or her attorney turned down a $750,000 offer from Cal.
Yeah, but it wasn't a lump sum. I think it was $80,000 a year for a certain amount of time.
Right.
Which I think would be generous if it didn't include child support. If child support was separate, then I think that would be very generous. But if that would include caring for all 4 children, I think that would be on the cheap side because he was pretty well off.
Yeah. And $80,000 in upstate New York sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
And her lawyer apparently said that had been agreed upon, that she was going to have custody of the kids and $80,000 a year for the next 10 years.
Right.
Maybe he decided he didn't want to pay $800,000.
That's possible. Now, shortly before she disappeared, Michele's lawyer had also made an appeal to the divorce court for an independent evaluation of Cal's business to see how much money he actually had. And doing the evaluation would cost him $30,000 up front, which, according to the nanny and Michele's family, that really made Cal angry. He didn't want to spend that money.
That's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I'd want to spend it either.
Okay. So investigators interviewed the family and the friends. they found that Cal had a history of domestic violence and controlling behavior in some past relationships.
But not this relationship.
Not any confirmed. We do have a few friends that came to the court and testified they'd heard him yelling at her, and of course Michele had told people he had threatened her.
Right.
But we don't have any police reports of domestic violence in this relationship, no.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to minimize that. Domestic violence is a real horrible thing.
Yes.
But it's still part of, or this stuff is he said, she said.
Right,
so
right.
I'm not sure how much credence I'd give to that.
Okay. Yeah, police were really not able to narrow their suspects down to one then. So they asked the three men that were in question, which would be Michael Hakes, the sexual predator, or sex offender, and the younger boyfriend, Brian Early, and the husband, Cal Harris. So these three men were asked to submit to a lie detector test. And not too surprisingly, Cal Harris refused. Now, I think that if you have a lawyer and you're right on top of things, you're not going to do a lie detector test for the police. It's not something that's permissible in court. I don't know that it really would accomplish anything to agree to do that, but they did.
Right. There's no upside
to
taking a lie detector test.
No, because even if you pass, you're not going to be off the hook.
Right.
Right.
And if you fail for whatever reason, you're the number one suspect.
Well, I think, yeah, pretty much in the public's eye, if you fail, you did it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, even though it wouldn't go to court.
It wouldn't go to court because it's not admissible, but yeah, I mean, here's a guy who failed a lie detector test. I think in the eyes of the police and in the eyes of the public, he'd be guilty.
Right. So the other two guys did agree to take it, and Brian Early passed the polygraph. He was also, according to detectives, very helpful with the investigation, giving the police DNA samples, allowing a full search of his apartment and of his car, which of course we know that, of course, Cal Harris did allow a full search of his home and his grounds with no question right away.
And her car.
In her car, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, Michael Hakes, the sex offender and the cook from Lefties, he passed the polygraph as well. So Cal Harris, he could afford, obviously, to hire some excellent lawyers, which the other two guys couldn't, and his lawyer would not allow Cal to take the polygraph according to Cal, which makes sense to me. I think any good lawyer wouldn't allow that. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So they wouldn't let him take the one that was administered by the police, but he did take one by a private person that they'd paid. So shortly after they'd given the polygraph test to the other two men, the police obtained a warrant and put a GPS on Cal's vehicle. Now this is very Breaking Bad type stuff. You go down by the hub of the wheel, you put this little box, and it tells you where they went, right?
Right, so what they figure they're going to track him and he's going to lead them to her body?
Probably something like that. See what he's up to anyway.
Okay.
But when they were tracking this GPS, Cal Harris drove to another part of the state with a private investigator his lawyer had hired, and he took the independent polygraph.
And do we know how he did?
No, we don't.
Okay.
But investigators were really suspicious because they had spoken to the nanny, and the nanny said that Cal had asked her to take Michele's van to the dealer and have it detailed and sold because it was a big mess. Now, this was within a couple of weeks of her disappearance, but it had already been searched.
But it's after it's been searched, and the police wouldn't turn it back over to him if they still had things to do with it.
That's right. So I didn't really think that was suspicious behavior.
Not to me, no.
Okay, I agree with you. I didn't think it was either. But they did try and hold that against him, and according to some local reporters, it didn't sit right with them that he was worried about selling her van right away. No, I don't know. I don't think he was selling it for the money. I think that he might have just been the kind of organized person that wants to take care of things. I could see that. I might be that way, like, get this done, out of the way, move on to the next step.
Yeah, I don't see any ulterior motive to selling it.
No, and he's a car dealer, so he's thinking,
well,
you have an extra car, you get rid of it.
That's what he does.
Right?
Yep.
Yep. So then we got some interviews with Michele's friends, who told police that Cal had threatened Michele over the upcoming divorce. And according to these friends, Cal had threatened Michele, saying, "If I want to kill you, I don't need a gun to do it." And that's when she had the guns removed from the house. He said that.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "If I do kill you, they will never find your body anyway."
That's right.
Yeah. So that sounds a little suspicious considering what ended up happening to her, because we have never found her.
No body.
No.
And they don't really have much evidence.
No.
So they went to trial. They charged him.
Yeah. Michele had also told her family that the only reason she stayed in the house was so she wouldn't lose custody of her children, and if she left, her lawyer had told her that it would be considered abandonment, and Cal could then get primary custody.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but that just sounds suspicious to me.
Really?
Yeah.
What does?
I mean, she could claim that she had to move out of the house because of mental abuse, and she just couldn't live there anymore. And she wasn't abandoning her kids. She was leaving her husband, who was doing bad things to her.
But was he doing bad things to her?
Well, no, not that we know of. I'm just saying that I find the argument that she couldn't leave the house because she could lose custody of the kids not to be ringing true to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So could she have left the house with the kids?
I don't know. I'm sure she could have, but he probably wouldn't have paid for any rent or anything on an apartment.
That's true, and that might be why she was going to sell things in New York that week.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think she could leave by herself, and I don't think that that would be thought of as abandonment of the kids if she had a credible story as to why she's leaving by herself. She could stay there and suffer whatever physical or mental abuse, although he has a restraining order against him, or protection order.
Right.
Or she could take the kids and leave, but she can't do that because she can't afford it.
Okay.
So she's staying there because it's the most financially viable alternative.
Okay, but I think according to a lot of Michele's family and friends, Michele was at a disadvantage here because Cal was the one that could afford the lawyers and get things done in order to get things the way he wanted them. Because actually Michele and Cal, they had met when she had worked at one of his dealerships. Now there were 6 family dealerships that he and his 2 brothers managed and owned, and she was a secretary there. It was her first marriage, and it was actually Cal's second marriage. Now at the time of her disappearance, they'd been married about 11 years, and according to Michele's family and friends, there was trouble in the marriage within the first 2 years. They said Cal had affairs, and a funny thing that they said was, well, mostly the women that he had affairs with were very nice women, and they looked a lot like Michele, small, blonde, attractive women.
So he has consistent taste.
I think so.
But I just, it doesn't sound to me that viable, that because he can afford good representation, he has an upper hand.
No?
No.
Okay. Why do you think?
Well,
I think he has the upper hand.
Because he has a better lawyer?
Because he has better resources. Yes. He has lawyers. His family probably knows lawyers. He has the resources to get lawyers. He's probably more credible in most.
Well,
among most people.
He got found guilty twice, so he didn't have the greatest lawyers.
No, but he is free.
Now he is.
Right.
He's been through a few trials and tribulations.
4 trials, actually, yeah.
But saying that, well, she sort of had to stay in the house with him because her lawyer wasn't as good as his lawyer just doesn't work for me.
Okay. Well, what would you think her reason would be then? Just because she couldn't afford another place to live?
I think it was purely financial.
Okay.
And she could have, with the kids there in the house with her, and like you said, he was paying for the babysitter, the nanny.
Right.
During daytime hours. And she could go work in her bar and drink and have fun and just have to pay for the sitter at night.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty convenient for her.
Yeah. Well, according to Michelle's friends, early in the marriage, she really did love Cal, and she was heartbroken when he had the affair and tried to make the marriage work. They tried some marriage counseling, but Cal would stop showing up for the appointments, actually. That's what Michele had told a couple of her friends. And friends said Cal insisted on having control in the relationship and that the divorce was Michelle's idea and he really didn't want the divorce. Now, it could be for financial reasons or maybe he didn't want to lose her. I don't know. But he really did not want the divorce.
Yeah, I don't know why he didn't want the divorce either.
Well, I think it was partially a control issue because by September 11th of 2001, Cal had really kind of lost control of Michele. She had a new boyfriend, a job, she had friends, and he was also going to lose control of his children's lives as Michele would probably have gotten primary custody after the divorce.
Well, that was the deal.
So things weren't really going the way he wanted them to go.
She was going to have full custody and she's going to get $80,000 a year.
Right.
That was the arrangement or the deal before it was finalized.
Yeah, and I don't know that the $80,000 a year was a lot of money. I think it might have been more about the control and not having his wife there.
Possibly.
Mm-hmm. On September the 12th, let's go back a little, the investigators, they'd only done a cursory search of the house, they said. So it was 3 days later that they brought the forensics team in on September 15th to do the follow-up search. And that's when, examining the kitchen, they found some tiny drops of blood on the walls, the floorboards, and the molding. So this was something. The drops were about 1 millimeter in size, and there was an upside-down U-shaped pattern stain with kind of a void in the center. And according to forensic experts, these U-shaped patterns are well known to forensics experts because the U-shaped patterns are a result of when you mix water with blood, causing the edge of the stain to dry faster than the center. So it's a sign of blood and an attempted cleanup of blood, actually.
So did they do other testing to show that it was cleaned up?
Well, yeah,
because you can do that. I mean, you can do luminol or something that can show where blood used to be.
There was extensive testing on the blood, and I don't know specifically. I know that there was over 45 minutes of testimony by the defense attorney on how the blood was tested. And I don't think we want to get into that right now.
No, we won't get into that, but nobody said that there was evidence that blood had been washed away, other than that one particular stain.
That pattern is actually an indication of that, and also the size of the blood stains that were not mixed with water from a cleanup attempt told an even more disturbing story. They were identified as medium velocity blood spatter, and that only results from hitting a body more than once with extreme force. And these stains are seen in cases of beatings or kickings that cause death. So that's even more disturbing than the cleanup aspect.
But these are stains that are few in number, correct?
I don't know. That's a relative term, few in number.
Okay.
I don't know.
Few
they were
in number,
significant enough to make note of.
And 1 millimeter in size.
Yes.
Because they've been wiped away, and this was what was left.
Yes, but the drops that they found had not been tampered with. These are intact drops.
Again, they're 1 millimeter in size.
Yes, which is identified as medium velocity. So if they're that size, it's known to be from a medium velocity spatter. It means that blood isn't just going to drip there for any reason at all. It means there had to be some kind of force. And experts actually have a pretty idea of what kind of force causes what kind of spatter.
Okay. I'm just thinking from what you've said about the blood that it doesn't sound like there was that much.
No, I don't think it was a large amount. It wasn't enough to say, oh, there was a dead body here, if that's what you mean.
Right.
Right.
And I'm thinking back to the staircase that we did earlier.
Right, right.
Where the same thing was spatter and everything, and there was blood all over that stairwell.
That was a lot more blood in that case, yes.
Right.
Right.
So where's the blood in this case?
Well, there is actually more to it now that you said that. There was a throw rug in the kitchen, and they turned that over and found 70 to 80 drops of medium velocity blood under that and into the rug. Now, there was no weapon found, but when they went to the garage near the kitchen, more evidence of blood cleanup was found on the floor, and the DNA testing proved that that was Michelle's blood. That was part of the cleanup on the garage floor. So we do have...
How extensive was the blood on the garage floor? Was there a lot of blood?
Well, they really couldn't say because it had been washed. There was old paint on the garage floor, so they thought that it had been washed up because they could tell by the way that the blood had gotten underneath the peeling parts. So if you can picture washing something off a floor with peeling paint, you can see that what you're washing up is going to get pushed underneath the peeling areas.
Okay.
So it was probably a significant amount, but I don't think they could really prove how much. You certainly couldn't prove, oh, well, that's so much that she couldn't be alive anymore. Not at all. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the blood that was in the house, on the rug and on the wall or the floor, was that Michelle's blood too?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else's?
No.
I recall from testimony in one of the trials that they couldn't exclude one of the children as being the blood.
I believe that's true, and that was in the U-shaped pattern of the cleanup. Some of that couldn't be identified because of the dilution.
Okay.
But it was blood within that family.
Okay, let's say that and not say that it was all Michelle's blood.
No, but the blood in the garage was Michelle's, definitely.
Yeah.
We did know that.
Okay.
But they don't know how much it was. I mean, she could have banged her knee and, we don't know.
Right.
There's no proof that there was any more than 10 mLs of blood, actually.
2 teaspoons.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, of course, there's no body. So this makes it really difficult to prove a case of murder to jurors if there's no body.
No body, no weapon.
Right. So
and I'm not even sure there's a motive.
Yeah, I'm finding the motive a little iffy. I don't think $80,000 a year is worth killing her to this guy. It's not going to cause him financial ruin.
No, apparently not. He was pretty wealthy.
Yeah, and this isn't even money that he broke his back for. This guy inherited this stuff. So he's just kind of used to having this money. I don't think that worrying about money was a problem in his life at all. But without a body, how can you prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt? The amount of blood involved in the garage floor cleanup, it was impossible for forensic experts to determine how much blood was there prior to cleanup. And also, as you said, Cale's motives for killing Michelle, what would they be? Would they be financial? They could be anger and vengeance, jealousy. It could be related to the custody of his children. But there really isn't one definite overriding motive for him to do this.
No.
No.
He didn't take out a $2 million life insurance policy on her or anything like that before she was missing.
No, not that I know of.
So, yeah, I'm a little thin on motive.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, no body, no weapon.
Right.
But nevertheless.
Well, there was some suspicious behavior by him. He made some incriminating statements to friends. For example, he was at a family picnic a few days after Michelle disappeared, and I guess they'd gotten a call from one of Michelle's family members saying that they may have found a body on the property. And Cal said that's impossible. Now, this was some way of the family testing him, I guess, and him saying that it's impossible. How would he know it's impossible unless he'd done something with her body and knew that she wasn't dead on the ground somewhere, right?
Well, and it could, to me, also be that it's impossible because he didn't kill her and he didn't dump her body on the property.
Well, that doesn't mean that someone else might not have done it, though. He's saying that someone met her at the end of the driveway. How does he know that that person didn't kill her?
Well, then they'd have to be pretty good at hiding her body on the property because it was pretty thoroughly searched. So somebody kills her at the end of the driveway and takes her body onto the property to dispose of it or to conceal it. They don't know the property that well. They don't know where to put her. And search dogs and helicopters and everything didn't find anybody. So I'm thinking he says that's impossible, meaning there's no body on my property.
I don't know what your thought on that is. I'm not sure if I abide by that.
That's okay.
I mean, are you saying because they did a thorough search that they would have found it earlier, and that's why he's saying it's impossible?
Right.
Okay, I guess that's believable. Yeah, I could see that. But, you know, if you're suspecting someone, you say, aha, why would he know that?
Well, sure.
Right? And that's what the families seem to think, because a lot of the family, they just didn't approve of Cal's behavior after Michele disappeared. He had sold most of Michelle's things within a few days, according to some, and he continued to spend time with his girlfriend, which they thought was distasteful. He'd actually invited his girlfriend to his house in late September, and the girlfriend said she was afraid to stay there because she was afraid that Michele might come home and be upset to find her in the home. And Cal said, don't worry, she's not coming home.
More incriminating evidence.
Now that could be as simple as, well, she took off 2 weeks ago. What are the chances she's going to show up tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Or it could have been, you know, she's dead at the bottom of the lake. There's no way she's showing up tonight.
Right. You can take that different ways.
Right. Now this woman, though, she said she still has a good relationship with Cal, although she's not his girlfriend anymore. She's not afraid to be around him. She's not uncomfortable with him. They're friends, so she doesn't think that he did it, apparently.
Right.
Now, when they searched the vehicles, because the family had many vehicles, there were four-wheelers and things like that, because they were out in the country, investigators didn't find any blood in or on any of these vehicles, and Cal had his truck washed at the car dealership the day Michele was reported missing. So that was another thing they thought was suspicious. Oh, he had his car washed. Why'd he do that?
He probably does it every week at his dealership.
Well, that's kind of what I thought. It could be suspicious, or it could just be something that he does very often. He owns the dealerships. It's a free service.
Right.
Probably has his car washed a couple times a week anyway.
This is the day she went missing.
Yes.
So he's not even sure what's going on, whether she's alive or not.
Unless he killed her.
Unless he did it.
Right.
But
if he killed her.
I'd be thinking that he was washing the car just because it was a Tuesday or something.
Okay. So if Cal did kill Michele, how did he move her body from the house, and where did he put it? These are some questions that investigators were dealing with right off the bat.
Right. See, again, it's kind of circumstantial stuff.
Yeah.
So they got some blood spatters that they think are Michele's.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't have blood in any of the vehicles, right?
Right.
None of the ATVs or anything. There's no blood other than in the household.
That's right.
Where did he go to dispose of the body that couldn't be found?
Well, that's the $1 million question. I mean, he was obviously arrested for the murder, but he was released on bail until his trial, which was actually several years later. Prosecutors delayed the trial because they were afraid that the defense would claim Michele was still alive if they did it right away.
Right.
They have no proof that she died, actually. And without a body, the prosecution had to rely on the fact that Cal was the only person with a motive to want Michele dead.
I'm interested, though, how many years do they wait till they say, okay, we think she's dead now? This went like 5 years before they went to trial?
The first trial was 2006, and admitting that it wasn't the strongest case, they did go ahead with the trial at that point. The prosecution had their theory that Cal was in the kitchen when Michele pulled into the garage the night she disappeared. Now, he might have been angry because he'd just gotten that notice about the $30,000 to have his business evaluated, and he may have confronted her when she got home. Now, when Michele walked into the kitchen, Cal would have attacked, according to prosecutors, and that would have been where the medium velocity blood spatter came from, on the kitchen walls and the molding. So they believe that she was unconscious after being hit, and she was dying. She'd been hit at least 3 times, when Cal would have dragged her body into the garage, and that would account for the blood on the garage floor.
Well, how about from the kitchen to the garage? No blood there.
Well, no, they're claiming cleanup would have happened on the floor between. Although it's very funny to me that the rug, who would have left a bloody rug? Oh, that's easy to throw in the wash.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still having trouble
Okay.
with this.
That's all right. So the prosecution says that at that point, when he got her in the garage, he put her body in a plastic bag, and they believe that he drove the body to the remote area somewhere in their land where he buried her. And then is when he parked the van at the end of the driveway because he wanted it to look like she never came home, but he didn't want anyone to see him walking home from the van. So if he'd parked the van somewhere, where there's main traffic, he may have been seen walking back. So their theory is that he parked it at the end of the driveway to make it look like she was coming home but didn't actually get home.
Okay, and he had her sealed in a bag that wouldn't leak blood.
I would hope so.
Because there's no blood in the car. There's no evidence that there had been a body in the car.
Nope.
And then he must have worn gloves because there weren't any of his prints in the car.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay.
Now they're saying, so he did that, came back to the house, and he tried to clean up the blood, but he didn't get it all. He didn't do a very good job. So,
yeah, that's the other thing. If I'm cleaning blood up, trying to hide a murder,
mm-hmm.
I'm going to do a pretty good job of cleaning.
I would think that would be the time of all times to do your best cleaning.
Right.
Right.
And that would include the rug that had the spatters. I mean,
right.
These were found underneath, so it was like you just turned the rug over.
And that's implied. I don't know. That seems pretty lame, but
it does.
Yeah. But when witnesses for the prosecution testified about the things he said and the threats he made to Michele, he did testify that they were all lying and just wanted to blame him for her being gone. The cell phone records were presented in the case, showing jurors that Cal never tried to call Michele that morning when she didn't come home on the 12th. And this was actually unusual because he normally did call her repeatedly if she wasn't home in the morning to take care of the kids. This isn't a guy who wanted to be taking care of the kids. He's a busy man. He had a business to run.
He's got a nanny.
Got a nanny. Where are you? I need to go to work. Kids need someone to take care of them.
He's got the nanny. She comes and takes care of the kids, and he goes to work.
Well, she wasn't there that morning. And she's the one he called and said, I need you to come and get the kids ready for school. Michelle's not here. She never came home.
Okay.
And this nanny was kind of upset about that. She was friendly with Michele and was concerned right away about why Michele didn't come home. So experts said there were motives, there were opportunities, but actually looking it over, there's very little evidence, just this small amount of blood spatter and some hearsay about his threats against Michele.
Yeah, I'm pretty thin on the evidence.
Mm-hmm. So the first trial, 2006, this was his first trial for the murder of Michele, and he was found guilty of second-degree murder. That's the gist of that one.
Yep.
But days before he was to be sentenced, a farmer came forward, and he's named Kevin Tubbs, and he's got some new information. Now he claims that at dawn of 9/12, he spotted two vehicles at the front of the Harris driveway, and this is where the van was found parked. He said he saw a dark pickup and a white van, and a man was standing at the front of the pickup, and a small blonde woman was standing at the side of the pickup. He said it appeared that she was crying, and the man looked kind of disturbed or upset.
Right. Mm-hmm. Like they'd been having an argument or something.
Something like that.
Something between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw this witness.
Kevin Tubbs.
Who suddenly comes forward.
Yes.
So there wasn't enough publicity with the first trial. He didn't come forward then? Or did he think that Cal was going to get found innocent and he didn't have to come forward anyway? Here he comes and says, oh, Jesus, I just remembered. I saw two cars at the bottom of the driveway.
Right.
And these people were talking. And one of them was a guy and one of them was a petite blonde who resembled Michele.
Yeah, and this is something that's not mentioned in any of the research, any of the videos I've watched, is why did Tubbs come forward at that point? This was a highly publicized case in a fairly small town.
Yeah, and he's a local.
He's a local. Murder's not common. So if you know that this blonde woman was killed who lived in this area, gee, wouldn't you mention that before the case? I mean, this is years later that the case goes forward.
One would think.
He's been holding this
is,
in for years.
5, 6 years later.
Yeah.
And he suddenly remembers or suddenly feels the need to come forward and say, this is what I saw.
Right. So I don't want to set off your bullshit meter, but I'm going to say somebody paid Kevin Tubbs. I think Cal Harris, his attorney, was saying, oh shit, this is really going to happen. He's going to get sentenced. He's going to spend his life in prison. Let's pay this schmuck over here to come forward. He's honest. He's believable looking.
Well, that's a convenient thing to say.
In what way?
That they paid him off. I mean, I don't know why it took him so long to come forward.
Well, what other reason would he have?
There is a lot more of a downside to being paid off. They're going to find out eventually that he was paid for giving that testimony.
Nobody's found out yet.
Yeah, because he wasn't paid.
Well, then why would he come forward 5 or 6 years later?
I don't have an answer for that, but
Okay.
I'm reluctant to say, oh, he was paid off.
Okay, well, it seems kind of obvious to me that he was paid off.
Okay.
This guy's got money. He says, well, who am I going to hurt if I take this $10,000 and lie about something small in court? I don't know that 5 years later you really remember enough of driving past 2 people on the street. Oh, yeah, she was a blonde. The truck was dark. I
Yeah,
had
but
no idea 2 weeks earlier if I drove by somebody.
He doesn't have to remember that much.
He has to remember that there was a truck, that there was a blonde woman, and what night it was.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Because I'm thinking, if I'm going to believe him, and I don't know why it took him so long to come forward, but if he had been there and he saw the truck and Michelle and some guy, he'd remember that because of the publicity about the murder. Now,
Yeah, but why wouldn't he mention it?
Maybe he didn't come forward at the time because he didn't think he needed to, or he didn't feel like Cal would be indicted. I don't know
Okay.
what the answer is.
Well, another thing, if he wasn't paid, maybe he did go to the police and was ignored. That's another possibility.
Sure.
And then he didn't feel like he needed to come forward with the defense until the police hadn't mentioned him. Now that I would believe.
I'll take that one too.
Okay, that sounds reasonable to me.
But we
So-
don't have any evidence for that either.
No, we don't know why he came forward that for such a long time.
But come forward he did.
He did, and the
Yeah.
judge actually found his account was credible.
Right.
And-
So he vacated the conviction.
Yep, threw out Cal's conviction, and Tubbs' account totally shattered the prosecution's timeline because Cal couldn't have killed Michelle if she was alive at dawn on the 12th, because their whole theory was that Cal had killed her the previous night when she came home
Right.
after visiting her boyfriend.
Yeah.
So that's thrown out, but the prosecution is not going to give up that easily, and they try Cal for the murder of Michelle again in June of 2009. And this is, at this point, Tubbs testifies. He hadn't testified at the last one. He spoke up. So Tubbs testifies, and Harris actually takes the stand in his own defense during this trial. But despite that, the jury convicts him again, and this time he's actually sentenced to 25 years to life in prison for the murder of Michelle.
Still second degree.
Yes.
So what was the original sentence?
The original? For this conviction?
The first conviction. How
He never got sentenced because Tubbs stood up before.
So so he was found guilty, but before sentencing occurred, Tubbs came forward and
Correct.
said, "Oh, wait a minute. Okay."
Correct, yep.
So now he's been found guilty a second time, and he's got 10 to 25 years.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So he's in prison for over 3 years at this point, and his attorneys are appealing, and an appeals court finds that the judge improperly allowed hearsay testimony in his second trial. So, unbelievably, Cal Harris' second murder conviction is overturned. This is pretty much unheard of.
So is this the same attorney that he had for the first trial and the second trial?
That I don't know. I know that his last trial was somebody else, but I don't know if the second trial was the same as the first.
Or the third trial. Because you had said there's 4 trials here.
There's 4 trials. I'm not sure who his representation was, if it had changed.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and do we know what the hearsay evidence was that he wasn't supposed to have allowed?
I don't know what the specifics was, but it was hearsay that Michele had told her friends and family regarding threats or behavior that Cal had done during the marriage.
Well,
and then
they allowed
that
it in the first
allowed.
trial.
Yeah, they did. I don't know, maybe more was allowed in the second trial. We don't know, because now these trials weren't filmed. The only trial that was videotaped and could be viewed was the 4th trial, actually.
Okay, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Mm-mm.
And I suppose maybe the first trial, if Tubbs hadn't come forward, maybe the first trial would have been overturned anyway because of allowing the hearsay evidence. Who knows?
That's possible.
They never got to that point. I mean, this second trial, he was in prison for 3 years before the conviction was overturned.
Right.
So
that's a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so he's a free man. Well, not free. He's out of jail.
Yes. So actually, the 3rd trial, attorney Bruce Marquette takes over Cal's case. And this is in 2015. And Bruce Marquette has enlisted a highly paid team of former police detectives and private investigators in an effort to clear Harris's name.
So they're going to look for alternative
Yes, they're trying
explanations.
That's right. They're trying to find out who actually killed her if it wasn't him. And of course, they're saying it wasn't him.
Right.
So they have a forensic expert, Natalie Beyer, and she's hired to take a closer look at the bloodstains that were found inside the Harris home after her disappearance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Natalie Beyer said the area in the kitchen was absolutely not a crime scene, and jurors deliberated on the 3rd trial for 11 days. But they were unable to agree on a verdict, so actually the 3rd trial ended with a mistrial related to a hung jury.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. So this is 3. But prosecutors aren't going to give up that easily. They put a lot of money into this. They have people in their community that hate this man. They want it taken care of. And they just really are not going to give up. So there's a 4th trial. And on the eve of Harris's 4th trial, the defense hired a man named Bill Flanagan. He's a retired deputy police commissioner, and that was to help them get a fresh perspective on the case, maybe find out what would have happened to her. And Flanagan says the real crime scene was at the end of the driveway where the van was found, not in the home. Now, remember, local farmer Kevin Tubbs claimed that he saw a male and a blonde woman outside of a dark pickup at dawn on September 12th. So the defense experts try to find out if any of the suspects in the case drove a dark pickup, and maybe they can make a connection there and find an alternative suspect in Michelle's demise. So they're taking a closer look into any men Michele may have known who drove a dark pickup, and they zero in on Stacy Stewart. Now, he frequented Lefty's bar where Michele was waitressing, and he fit the description that Kevin Tubbs had given, and he also drove a 2000 black Chevy pickup. Cal Harris's attorneys interviewed Stacy Stewart, and Stewart says he's never dated Michele or seen, and he didn't see her the night she disappeared. Stewart tells the attorneys around the time Michele went missing, an old drinking buddy of his, Chris Thomason, came to Stewart's home, and he was covered in blood. Stewart says that Chris Thomason came with a female friend whose name he didn't know, and that they looked like they might have just skinned a deer or something, and they went out back, they burned their clothes in a fire pit. Now, the defense team's private investigators searched this fire pit, and they're going through like they're mining for gold, going through the dirt and everything, and they find a button that looks like it may have been to a light-colored shirt, and they find part of a bra strap. Now, they don't claim to know what happened to Michele, but they believe there are at least 3 people associated with this property where they found the burn pit, the fire pit, who at least have some more information on what happened to Michele.
So we have, who's in this burn pit? Whose burn pit is it? Fire pit?
It's at Stacy Stewart's house, and he says that this Chris Thomason and a female who were covered in blood burned their clothes outside of this pit. And the thought is that maybe they actually burned Michele's body out there as well.
Well, they couldn't have, because
Okay.
you can't burn a body in a fire pit hot enough to turn it to dust.
Right.
So there's going to be some remains.
Mhm.
So forget that. Maybe they burned clothes
Okay.
that they, although why would they take clothes off of her
I
and
don't
burn
know.
them?
Well, and the defense doesn't claim to know what happened. All they say is that these people might have some idea of what happened to Michele, and they want these people to be spoken to and investigated.
Right. So they found a few of these people. This was fun tracking them down. Chris Thomason was in jail for some unrelated crime, but he said he didn't burn anything.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing in his fire pit.
Yeah, well, he certainly wouldn't lie.
Not at all. He's a credible witness. The investigator found Stacy Stewart's ex-girlfriend, because Stewart, surprise, surprise, didn't show up at the 4th trial.
That's right.
So this ex-girlfriend, Julie Brigman, said that Stacy once told her he knew how to hide a body.
Yeah.
So we've got some interesting stuff there.
Right.
And the defense team also at that point, or somewhere around that time, applied for a change of venue because Cal's been through 3 trials. Everybody in town thinks he's guilty. We need to move the trial.
Well, yeah, you can't find anyone in that town who hasn't heard of this case. You can't even find anyone in the county that hasn't heard of this
Right.
case.
Yeah. So I guess they got the change of venue. The defense attorney, Marquette, also opted for a bench trial rather than jury trial.
Yeah, no, this was pretty unusual.
Yeah. Did they explain their thinking about that, or is that something that just happened?
Well, the attorney just thought that he could get a more objective deliberation from a judge because he felt that even outside of their town that there was just, well, there's just a really bad opinion of Cal Harris, and he didn't trust jurors, so he decided to take this risk to have a judge determine his guilt or innocence.
And like you said, the only trial that was videotaped was the 4th trial.
That's right.
Or maybe not even the whole 4th trial, just the closing arguments. But what I was watching was highly technical stuff.
Oh, it was so dry. It would
And
be hard to pay
probably it
attention.
would play better with the judge than a jury of the peers.
Yeah, it would be painful to try and sit and listen to that all day.
Yeah.
Very technical blood evidence stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I know DNA to some extent, and I was falling asleep.
Yeah, so imagine if you're a layperson who has no idea.
Yeah, you'd be gone.
It would be really be hard to pay attention to that.
So the closing arguments, the defense argument is that Cal Harris does not play well with the media, and he's been unfairly judged by the public.
Yeah, well, he does have this scowl on his face.
Yeah, what did one of the defense people say? She wanted to Botox him
She
to
wanted
get
to
rid of
Botox him.
that crease.
Yeah, and she said he just had this attitude that I'm innocent and I don't give a shit if you believe me or not because I'm innocent. So maybe not the most likable guy.
They did a lot of talking about the DNA.
Right.
They talked about the burn pit. That was found, evidence from there was found inadmissible because there was no DNA connection.
Yeah,
to
that was such a stretch from reality.
No kidding.
And that's just...
And then they also found recordings from Stacy Stewart and Chris Thomason, the 2 guys, also inadmissible. And I'm not sure why. I guess it just didn't matter.
Well, I think that the recordings between them, Stacy Stewart said these things about Chris Thomason, and Chris Thomason denied them. So it was just one kind of scumbag versus another kind of scumbag.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't get you anywhere. So at this point, the defense decided to focus on the lack of evidence rather than that. And they had mentioned how the photos had poor exposure and that the prosecution team had actually altered them. And in altering them, they called it exposure correction. So they had videotape of the prosecution along with Henry Lee, who we know from the staircase.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about these photos of the blood in the house and how you really couldn't see it. So they were doing things exposure-wise to make it easier to see, which is technically not allowed. You can't be.
It sounds like trickeration.
Yeah. It's tampering with the evidence that you have, I guess. So they used that in the defense. And then Kevin Tubbs is brought in, and he is thought of as a credible witness because he has no motivation to lie.
So you say. I'm not buying that.
No. And if Kevin saw Michele that morning, then of course Cal Harris couldn't have killed her, and the prosecution has no new evidence in the trial. But prosecution witness Kevin Tubbs is really called into question because it's been years. Does he really remember seeing these two people, these two cars, this one morning, where he can say that, oh yeah, it looked like Stacy Stewart, yes, it was a small blonde woman. Really kind of hard to believe that anyone would remember that. But there is no new evidence added, and eventually the judge does find that Cal Harris is not guilty and he's acquitted. So his legal troubles in this issue are done.
Can't be charged again.
No.
So 2 convictions, a hung jury, and an acquittal.
That's right.
A long journey.
That's right. It's been 15 years because this just happened, I think, was it in April of this year? The final
thing. Yeah.
So it was 15 years.
And it was 2001, September.
Yeah. So I guess it would have been 15 years in September. Now, Cal Harris was interviewed by several people after this, and he says that he feels relief, but he wants retribution for the misconduct by the New York State Police, and he's actually filing a civil suit against the county prosecutor and the state police in New York.
And what was grounds? I mean, planting evidence? Falsifying evidence?
Falsifying evidence with the pictures. Yep.
Okay. And they've admitted to enhancement of the pictures.
They call it exposure correction and say that that is legal. So.
Okay. But that's what most of the case was based on.
Well, and then he says that the forensic experts with the blood were incorrect. Henry Lee, the others, because he had his defense team had hired forensic experts who actually disagreed with what they said about the medium velocity spatter. Now, interestingly enough, the Harris children have supported their dad throughout the years, and they are actually estranged from Michele's family.
Well, I would imagine you can't have both. If you're pro-Cal, you're not going to be very well received by her family, by Michele's family.
Yes.
So that wouldn't surprise me, even though they're their grandkids.
Right. I mean, a part of this I can't ignore, unfortunately, is that Michele's family, working class people, not a lot of resources to get visitation or custody of the children. Of course, if he's not convicted of the murder, they probably aren't going to get custody, but I feel like if they were wealthier people with more resources, they probably could have worked out some kind of visitation at least and been part of the lives of the children.
Well, who knows that they didn't try to do that? All you're saying is that the children are estranged from her side of the family.
Right.
Maybe they did try to do that.
Yes, and they were blocked because Cal is the one with the money and the resources, is what I'm saying.
So you're saying that Cal refused to allow them to see the kids?
Sure, because they think he killed them. Could you blame him? Would you want your kids to be with people who are going to tell them that you're a murderer?
Well, I think they could come to some agreement where they could see the kids and not say your father's a murderer.
Right, and that's why I think that if they had resources, that would have been worked out. But since these are, I don't know if they're poor, but if they're working class people, let's just leave them out and they can't do anything about it.
Well, that's kind of harsh. I think there's plenty of people that would do pro bono work to help grandparents see their grandkids.
Oh, it must be nice to live in your world.
I'm
It must be really rosy in there.
I'm enjoying it.
I would too. So it's a very fascinating case. I guess it's kind of case closed at this point, unless Michele shows up, at the police station and says, "Hey, here I am." Or if we find if something comes up, maybe someone on their deathbed will confess that they killed her.
Perhaps. I mean, at some point they might find human remains or bones and identify them as Michele's.
And that's possible.
Because I would think after 15 years, if she hasn't shown up or been heard from at all, that she's dead.
I think so, especially because she has 4 children.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. She probably is dead, but I don't know if they find her on the family property. There's really nothing they can do about it now because Cal has been acquitted.
Right. So he could exhume her body, walk down to the police station and say, "Here she is."
He could.
That's an extreme example.
He could say, "Na, na, 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 na."
I probably shouldn't say that.
No, but he could. He could.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's going to happen either.
No, because he's innocent, he says.
That's right. So I'd like listeners to let us know what they think. You can let us know at tiegrabber.com. And you can email us at truecrimebrewery@tiegrabber.com. And if you ever wonder how we provide such amazing content for free, I know that Dick wonders that often.
No, I know how we do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do it?
We just sit down and start talking.
Yeah. But we do it with the support of our listeners. That's how we upgraded our audio equipment, right?
That's right.
By a very generous listener. So we're entirely supported by listeners. We have no advertising. And if you'd like to be a contributor, you can subscribe on our website for as little as $2 a month using PayPal. We also have a Patreon account where you can help us out. That, of course, is patreon.com/True Crime Brewery. If you enjoy True Crime Brewery and you also are a person that is watching Outcast, which is Robert Kirkman's new show on Cinemax, please check out Outcasting. This is your unofficial podcast of Outcast, and it is available on iTunes and Stitcher and Google Play, just as True Crime Brewery is. And there have actually been 2 episodes so far, so it's still early enough to get in on it if you haven't watched the show. And also any 5-star reviews that you would like to share with us, we would love to share on an upcoming episode of True Crime Brewery. And also if you know of a case that is True Crime Brewery worthy, let us know by leaving us a voicemail at www.tiegrabber.com. We might just cover it if enough people show interest in that case. And
right. We're always open for new ideas.
That's right.
Send them in.
So as always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week with the new case, and we'll meet you back at the bar.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, goodbye.
Goodbye.